Hi, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Game Industry Insight, a look behind the scenes at game development. And be sure to subscribe and you can pitch future video topics. Alright, for today's Industry Insight, we're going to be returning to the topic of branding. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the kinds of brands that we see in the game industry. This is kind of a continuation of my thoughts on Valkyria Revolution, which, if you're watching this right now, the spotlight video should have went up yesterday. And despite being the next in the Valkyria Chronicles series, it is a very far departure from it. And as a fan of the franchise, it hurts to play this game. But that is kind of the main point when we talk about branding and how it can be a double-edged sword for developers and publishers. So the first big point when it comes to the kinds of brands is the character or mascot driven brand. And I'm sure all of you watching this right now can certainly think of at least one example of that. From Bugs Bunny, the Minions, Mickey Mouse, G.I. Joe, Transformers, you name it. These are industries or these are brands that are popularized by a character or characters who will usually become the face of the marketing. Now, in terms of the three that we're going to talk about, this is the lowest, but it's still better than nothing. And if you haven't guessed by now, our little friend Mario here is certainly a very big example. Now, when it comes to character brands, the beauty or the simplicity of them is that it's very hard to betray the character or betray the brand in this way. Our friend Mario right here has been in a lot of different games, from platforming, RPGs, racing, Olympics, soccer. I'm sure they'll throw in a football. Oh, there's of course tennis, I almost forgot as well. And it's very hard to, like I said, to portray a character brand. You pretty much have to go way out of the box to do that. So I don't think we're ever going to see a Mario plus Manhunt collaboration anytime soon. But character-driven mascots or character-driven brands were one of the major parts of the game industry from about the 80s to the early thousands. If you caught my interview with Clayton, who was the lead designer on Voodoo Vince, he talked about how things really changed from that period. The mascot-driven games were such a lucrative property for game developers and publishers, because if you get the next Mario or the next Sonic, you can really position that character, and of course merchandising. Don't make me get out my Mario quiz card box again, folks. But like I said, there really aren't too many downsides to this other than the fact that you really never know what character is going to become the next big thing. Of course, having a quality show or quality game certainly helps, but it's very hard to figure out, who will be the next one. And as we've seen, especially over the last decade, character-driven games have kind of fallen by the wayside in favor of example number 2, and that is the franchise or game-driven brands. Now, obviously, this represents series that become brands onto themselves. Call of Duty, Battlefield, Assassin's Creed, Dead Space was attempting to do that. I'm sure what we're seeing with Shadows of Mordor and Shadows of War as well. But basically, this is the one that AAA development loves. And we've talked about this before. When it comes to game design, it is a lot of risks. You never know whether your game will be the next Game of the Year multi-million copy seller, or it falls off the Steam front page faster than you can say, pick a game here. But the point is, there's a lot of unknowns that go into game development. And the beauty of sequels and franchise-driven brands is that some of that risk and uncertainty is mitigated. If Game 1 in a series sold about 2 million copies, well, Game 2 should sell about that same amount, probably even a little bit more. The beauty of franchise is that it gives developers a chance to work with a known property or design, which also allows them to iterate. And as we've talked about, some of the most polished and well-regarded games have come from sequels, be it stuff like Assassin's Creed 2, the growth of Call of Duty, and I'm sure again there are more examples that I am forgetting right now. However, Despite the advantages, there are some downsides. This is when we start to get into the territory of having to control the brand. As in, you have to be careful not to overstep or betray the trust of your fans. Because the beauty of brand recognition and brand loyalty is that your fans will support you. But you betray that and they will turn on you. And we have seen some major examples of that. And when it comes to a franchise brand, it's important for you as a designer to understand what elements make up my brand. As in, what's X, Y, and Z that are driving people to play my game. And if you get rid of, downplay, or replace those, prepare to hear from it. And sadly, there are some big examples of this. Banjo and Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is arguably one of my all-time favorite games. I love that title. If I saw it on my 360 or if I had an Xbox or some means of streaming it, I would play that game for you. But it is a complete and utter departure from Banjo and Kazooie's gameplay. And that's kind of interesting because you would think with a game like Banjo and Kazooie that it would be character driven. But more people were focused on the gameplay and the mechanics rather than the characters, as evident by the recent or semi-recent release of Yooka-Laylee. But the problem with Nuts and Bolts was that there was nothing in this game reminiscent gameplay-wise from the original two Banjo-Kazooies. Yes, you played as Banjo-Kazooie, you were in their world and you fought Gruntilda, but everything else was completely different. And this is where fans felt that Rare kind of betrayed their trust with the brand. It would be like buying a Call of Duty game that's named after all the other games in the series, it has the same box art, you put in your console, and you find that it is a Euro pop dance game instead of a first-person shooter. Another case will, of course, be Dead Space, and we did the dissecting design of Dead Space, I think a week and a half ago, almost a year and a half ago, and the first game was well received, the second game was more popular gameplay-wise, and then it just went downhill with number 3. And a lot of that was from EA's interference with trying to turn to the next big budget action game, and the infamous asking them to sell 5 million copies. But that's kind of the risk when you run into these brands. If a brand has about 2-3 million copies in sales, asking 5-6 million is kind of out of the question. And again, you run the risk of if you change things too much, then you betray the trust or the original vision. Another big point would be how developers change from trying 2 to trying 3, and the backlash fans had when the series moved to 3D and felt like it was lesser than the sum of its parts compared to the last two. And of course, there's Valkyria Revolution, which removes the tactical RPG style gameplay for just ARPGs, removes the hand-drawn aesthetics, and again, it looks like Valkyria Chronicles. It may sound like Valkyria Chronicles, but it is not. And I found out after doing my spotlight of it that it's actually being done by a different developer. And that's another big point. If you're trying to continue a brand or a franchise, you don't want different hands looking at the game. Sometimes they may make a better game, but again, if you're trying to preserve the integrity of the brand, you can run that risk of betraying the trust. Now, the final point, and the highest in terms of brand recognition in the game industry, is companies as a brand. This is when the developer or the studio themselves become a brand onto themselves. It could be because of the quality of the games, could be because of unique appearances or style, or it could just be because of how people treat the brand or treat the developers. And there are a few examples of this. Nintendo, Valve, Blizzard would be some of the bigger name examples. And then the indie side, we have companies like Clay Entertainment, Devolver Digital, even someone like Tiny Build as well. In essence, this is when the company itself is not really known entirely for their games, but known as more known as the developer. I think I just flubbed it as well. Let me rephrase that. This is when the company itself becomes more recognizable than the games they've made. Like I said, they may make some great games, but they're not really following the same trend as the previous example, where if you like Assassin's Creed, you're going to get more Assassin's Creed, and more Call of Duty, and more Madden. In this case, you become more recognized or more interested in the company itself, and whatever their next crazy project may be. And Clarington would be a really good example of this. They've gone from the likes of Shank to Don't Starve, Invisible Ink, and Auction Not Included, and then their latest game that was announced at E3 2017. And again, each one of these games is different. They're mechanically and system-wise completely different from each other. But people are excited because they've grown to trust the brand of Clay. And when we talk about some major examples, such as Nintendo, Nintendo is one of the bigger points. Again, with games like Mario, Nintendo doesn't put out a lot of main branch games. We may get a new Mario game maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 or 3 years. But when that happens, people are very excited about it. And we've talked about that kind of mythical Nintendo quality or Nintendo magic to their games, but that is another video in of itself. But the real king of when it comes to a company or studio brand would arguably be Blizzard. Blizzard is one of the best, and we've talked about this one before. But Blizzard doesn't just see each one of their games as standalone brands or properties. They see the entire catalog as one big brand, and they've developed and marketed their games to promote this cross-brand advertisement. And again, you can see this with just about every one of their releases. If you buy Overwatch, for instance, you may get a unique pet or wings for Diablo 3. If you're playing Diablo 3, you could unlock a unique card back for Hearthstone. Play Hearthstone, maybe you'll get something for Heroes of the Storm. The whole big Heroes of the Storm relaunch from a few weeks ago, you may remember that one of the more touted advertisements of that was if you played it well enough, you would unlock unique skins for, I think it was Hanzo and maybe a few other characters. And that's the beauty of this kind of multi-game branding or studio brand. They know they have individual people who will only play StarCraft or only play Overwatch. But if they get people to play multiple games, not only can it make them more of a fan of Blizzard, but it means that they'll be more open to try other projects and other development ideas. Like I just said, if tomorrow Blizzard announced that if anyone for the next week signs into StarCraft 2 and plays 5 ranked matches, they'll receive a unique My skin, you know a whole lot of people are going to sign into StarCraft for the next week. And the beauty of this kind of brand loyalty, this company loyalty or company branding, is the fact that when it works, anything that the company puts out becomes a massive news announcement. Again, Nintendo, Valve, Blizzard, they can announce just about anything relating to an upcoming product or game reveal, and you know every major website is going to cover it. Now, the downside about this is very simple. We're basically playing at the very highs and the lowest lows. If you betray the trust of your fans or anger them or lie to them in any way and you lose their loyalty at this level, you're never getting them back. Because this is where we talk about, company faux pas, the stuff that can sink entire studios. Because once you become blacklisted like this, the stigma is going to follow you. Such as the infamous case with, what was their name again? I think Silicon Knights. Yes, the ones who developed that horrifically bad X-Men game and who tried to get a Kickstarter for a spiritual successor to Eternal Darkness. And again, once you've lost your fans' trust at this level, your studio's basically done. You're going to need one hell of a Hail Mary play in order to get them back. But to wrap up today's industry insight, brands are a very important part of recognition and, of course, building that loyalty. And again, having your fans support you can be one of the greatest things in the world, but you have to treat them right. Now, like I said, when it comes to either character or mascot, franchise, or companies themselves, this is not something that happens overnight. And we've seen developers and studios try to push or force this in the past. Again, from the 90s, early thousands, everybody wanted to have the next character or mascot driven game. But it's one of those things that it's a combination of quality, professionalism, and sometimes just dumb luck. You never know when a certain character or a certain game will inspire or enlighten a fan base. So, with that said, my final question for you folks is, besides the big examples we've mentioned, are there any other major studios that you can think of that have become brands unto themselves? Let me know in the comments below, but otherwise, thank you so much for watching today's Industry Insight. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know if you have any other ideas for future topics, and be sure to check back daily for more discussions on game design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and come back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game development, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. Follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day. And to help support everything that I do, you can find me on Patreon under GWBycer or Game Wisdom. Your donations can help to keep things running, and we hit some goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy. So, thanks again for watching, and be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design on the Game Wisdom channel.